All right, so goal for this video is to figure out the mounting solution for the differential and transmission coolers as well as the pumps. So my plan is to take an unconventional approach, but let's see if I can make it work. All right, so for the diff and trans cooler, I'm going with something that's a little different than at least I haven't seen it used before, and at least not on a Mustang. But given my unique design on the back of the car, I have some opportunities to try something new. So I'm using identical coolers. These are, I'll drop a link in the description, but it's a C-Trab fan kit that I got from Pegasus. So the fan and the cooler come as a kit. I want to say they're like $400 or somewhere about there. And then I have some tilt-in pumps that I'm using. These are recommended. This exact setup is recommended by my transmission builder. Or manufacturer, I should say, and then I know this is a similarly common kit for the diff. So the idea is I'm going to mount these in the back here and rely heavily on the fans for cooling, or for airflow, I should say, because I don't plan to duct them where they get their own airflow. So going underneath the car here, the GT4 factory cars put them right there. So because the fuel cells moved into the back, they use this location for, one there and then one over there for the cooler. And I originally was going to do that, but this is a really great area to put mufflers if you end up doing something for the exhaust. And one of the things I wanted to do really bad on this build is a side exit exhaust. And then one of the things I really like about utilizing this space here is if I can utilize this big cavity underneath the car for mufflers, and it will allow me to put mufflers on the car when I need to go to a track that has a sound requirement, or just run straight exhaust at a track like Coda where it doesn't matter. So I really wanted to leave those open. So that left me to trying to figure out how I could put the coolers back here, because I don't want to put them up front where the weight is. We already have too much weight over the front of the car. So I think I have a solution that will work. And it's to take this guy. Actually, let me mount you so I can use both hands. All right, so my idea is essentially to mount the cooler like this. So this isn't a whole lot of airflow, but it should be enough. There's this big opening here, and then there's a big opening over here. Oh, I realize you can't really see it, but there we go. So if we look right about there, there's a pretty decent opening. And then, of course, there's the opening behind it, which I can fit my whole hand in. And if I do have issues, there'll be a decent amount of air inside the wheel well here, so I could create a duct that pulls some of, or pushes some of that air into this cavity. So I don't think it'll be an issue, but I have some options if it does end up being one. But anyway, so my thought is, I think I can use this pinch weld here to drop a couple rivet nuts in. And then I think if I just weld a couple tabs, one here and one over there, I'll be able to mount this, pretty secure. And it's nice enough out of the way. It's hard to see. This angle doesn't really do it, but it's hard to see, but this is higher than the fuel cell. So this isn't likely to get hit from the car bottoming out or anything like that, because the fuel cell would hit first, and that's assuming it crushes the diffuser that I'm going to put on. So this should be a pretty good spot. There's an identical spot over there, so I can do transmission on one side and diff on the other, and then the tilt and pumps could, they could either go up here or somewhere else in the general area. So I'm going to go ahead and start to drill some areas for some rib nuts here, and then tap into this here to add my tabs for the rib nuts there, and we'll see if we can get this mounted up in a way that I like. And by this I mean this guy. All right, so fortunately I've learned my lesson at this point, and I now know the right order of operations to do things when I'm doing these small fab projects. So first things first, I'm going to drill my holes in the pinch welds here to install my rivet nuts, because I don't have a lot of flexibility here. The pinch welds aren't very tall. You don't have a lot of room to move around, so I use these as my reference point because there's just not a lot of give here. So once I've drilled the holes, installed my rivet nuts, I then can use these as the reference for where to put the tabs that I need to weld to the frame rail. And once I've marked those up, I lift the car up so that I can weld the tabs on. All right, so underneath the car here, looking at where we want to place this tilt pump, a couple different ways to go about it. There is a little bit of room here, which I thought about doing, but the problem is, even if I build a bracket that pulls it down, it makes servicing it pretty difficult, getting a wrench up there, all that kind of stuff, and it'll hang down, and I'm not sure I like that approach that much. The other approach is to put it like this, up in here, which keeps all the hoses free up out of the way. It keeps this tucked out of the way where nothing can get to it. Fairly easy to service. Will be a little bit harder here with the sway bar in, but it's definitely possible. So I think my two options are right here or right here. I'm leaning right here just because that gives me a much safer way to mount it. But you know, this is definitely an option where I could build a plate that I then drill into here or weld. Weld would probably be safer overall, but this will be a little bit hard to weld to this area. So I'm gonna go do some mock-up of some things and kind of see where we end up and see if I want to do it here or over there. All right, so I'm going ahead with mounting it on that area that's above the fuel cell, so not the section next to the fuel cell and cooler, but kind of in between the fuel cell and the rear K-member. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make some little plates here, little square plate, and then I'm gonna weld nuts in here and then mount this up in the body of the car, like inside the interior of the car, and then screw into that to sandwich the metal there. Reason being is this is something that I really don't want to come flying off, and I'm a little worried about stressing a bunch of rivet nuts with it hanging upside down all the time. So this will just be a more secure way to hold it there, given the fact that fluid being leaking out the back of the car and all that kind of stuff is just so scary to me, because it will, you know, cause fires, cause a car to crash, stuff like that. I just want to be extra safe. So gonna cut something like this out, weld some nuts to it, and then mount it inside the car and mount that way. All right, so let's get started. All right, so I've already gone ahead and test fit that one. Now we're gonna go ahead and install this guy. So to hold this in place while I start to screw in my screws here, I've put some weight on the top here. This just makes it so as I start to thread these, it doesn't slide around on me. All right, so let's go ahead and head underneath and install the oil pump. All right, so looking here, I've actually changed the orientation of the pump a little bit. Let me throw this guy up there for visibility. Is it this way? Nope, it's this way. All right, so I've changed the orientation a bit, so it's now like this. Reason being is this keeps the hoses and the connection points better protected against debris coming up underneath, which I was a huge fan of. As well as it makes sure that, you know, if this were to get loose a little bit, it would fall onto this a little bit. It just kept it a little more out of the way and in a safer area for me. At least that's how I felt. Sorry about that. The microphone fell off. But yeah, so I just liked this orientation better. it felt a little more secure, a little more protected from things going wrong. So I'm going to go ahead and run with this, and then if needed, we can always change it. Not ideal, but also not end of the world. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and install this now. All right, so here we go, mounted up. Got nice fat washers here, so this isn't going anywhere. We're being held in, obviously, by these bolts, but there's no metal connected, so we have some nice isolation here from the pump to the car, or to the chassis, I should say. And now that we are fully installed, you can see we have plenty of clearance for, a little -6 here. It's not a big fitting, so we can come off this way, go that way for the transmission, and then out this side to the or I should say from the cooler into that, etc., etc. So I think this routing came out really great. At least tons of room on the side here for me to run lines to the transmission and then to the cooler here, as well as being nice and fairly well protected from debris underneath the car. So at a later date, I'll show how I wire everything up. This will be when I start to do the wiring harness and programming with the PDM. But essentially, the goal is to poke the harness down through this bulkhead fitting, or with a bulkhead fitting through here, and wire up the cooler for the diff. Sorry, not that cooler. Wow, I'm not doing well with words today. Wire up the temperature probe on the diff, as well as wire up the 2 fans for the 2 different coolers and the 2 pumps. And I'm not sure if there's anything else back here that'll need it. But either way, that'll be in a future video. So that, I think, does it for this part. All right, so one benefit of taking so bloody long to edit these videos, I can actually teleport you into the future and show you what it looked like beyond where I finished filming. So I realized when I was editing the video that I didn't provide any actual overview of how the install looked. So I'm coming back to do that now, and because I've made progress since then, you can see how it actually turned out. So as you can see, welded tabs onto the frame rail here, as I talked about in the video, and then used riv nuts to attach. They're super solid, right? Like you could drag the car around by these guys. I only did 1 set of bolts per side on the pinch weld side, but honestly, this thing's held in so well by these guys, I'm not worried about it. As far as the pumps, I did end up having to flip them around because of the I couldn't make it work going that direction with the various pieces that I needed to juggle. And unfortunately, as a result of that, one side was always going to be the wrong direction. So ideally, this pump would be flipped this way. That way, the flow in and out of the pump would be correct, but nothing I could do there. The good news is it doesn't interfere with the sway bar at all, so there's tons of room. Still had room for my bulkhead fitting for fuel right there. And then as you can see, I've already run the lines here, which I'll cover in more depth in a future video, but -6 coming out of the diff here. So we got, the outlet from the diff going, the hot oil going straight to the cooler, and then it comes, out the cooler and it goes to the pump, and then from the pump back down to the diff. So really happy with how this came out. I need to add a couple mounts here for to clamp the hoses down, but other than that, we're in really good shape. It came out in really nice, clean install. And as I said, these are super solid mounted. I'm not worried about them at all. So really happy with how everything came out. All I have left is to fill stuff with oil, wire it up, and see how it works. But like I said, I'll do that in a future video. All right, so that's gonna do it for this video. Hopefully that was interesting or gave you guys some ideas. It might be a horrible solution. I don't know. We'll find out in the future when I actually start to, put the car on track, if I ever get to that point. But if you have any questions or comments, as always, drop them in the comment section down below, and I'm happy to answer what I can. And if you prefer Instagram, I'm also there at Honey Badger Shenanigans. All right, peace.